This is the story of a girl who died and came back with a message that will send chills down your spine. Lily, a 13-year-old from Texas, was just an ordinary girl until the day her heart stopped. For several minutes she was gone, her body lifeless. But during that time, something incredible happened. She claimed she saw Jesus, and he didn't just welcome her. He showed her something urgent, something terrifying. When she returned, she was no longer the same. She had a message, a warning, and a truth that the world needs to hear. And now, she's telling it all. Lily's day started like any other, completely normal, with no hint that she was about to face something that would change her life forever. It was a bright, warm morning in Texas, the kind where the sun painted golden streaks across the sky, and the air smelled of freshly cut grass. She had woken up groggy but excited, ready for another day of school. She wasn't thinking about heaven or death. She wasn't thinking about Jesus. She was thinking about whether she had remembered to do her math homework. Her mother had made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice, the usual. Her little brother was watching cartoons, laughing at something ridiculous, completely lost in his own world. It was a house full of the kind of small moments that people take for granted, moments that feel like they'll last forever. Lily grabbed her backpack, slung it over her shoulder, and rushed out the door to catch the bus. The ride to school was the same as always, loud, full of chatter and music playing from someone's phone. She sat by the window, staring out, daydreaming about the weekend, about sleepovers and movies, about normal things. She never could have guessed that by the end of the day, she'd be dead. It happened during gym class. The students had been running laps outside when Lily suddenly stopped. She felt a sharp pain in her chest, like someone had grabbed her heart and squeezed. At first, she thought she was just out of breath, that maybe she had run too fast. But then, the pain got worse. Her vision blurred. The world tilted sideways. She collapsed. At first, her classmates thought she had just tripped. But then they saw she wasn't moving. Her teacher ran over, calling her name, shaking her gently. "Lily, Lily, can you hear me?" No response. Someone screamed for help. The school nurse rushed to the field, but the moment she saw Lily's still body, her face paled. She pressed her fingers to Lily's neck, checking for a pulse. Nothing. Lily wasn't breathing. Her heart had stopped. The nurse immediately began CPR, while another teacher called 911. The students stood frozen, watching in horror as their classmate, who had been laughing just minutes ago, lay motionless on the ground. The ambulance arrived within minutes, sirens wailing, paramedics racing to take over. They worked on her as they lifted her into the back of the ambulance. For them, it was just another emergency. For Lily, it was something else entirely. Because while they were fighting to bring her back, she was somewhere else, somewhere beyond this world. Lily didn't feel herself die, not in the way you'd expect. There was no instant pain, no panic. One moment she was in her body, hearing muffled voices, feeling hands pressing on her chest. And then she wasn't. It was like slipping out of a heavy coat. Suddenly, everything felt light, effortless. She could still see the field, the paramedics, her teachers, even her own body lying there. But she wasn't in it anymore. She was above it, floating, watching. She saw her mom's car pulling up to the school, her mother stumbling out in sheer terror. She saw her classmates, wide-eyed and scared, whispering among themselves. But no one saw her. No one heard her when she tried to speak. Panic should have set in. But instead, a strange peace washed over her. Then, the world around her shifted. The school, the field, the paramedics, all of it faded, as if it were made of smoke, and she was moving, being pulled somewhere else. She didn't fight it. She couldn't. It was like an invisible force, warm and all-encompassing, was guiding her forward. The darkness didn't last long. Within seconds, she emerged into something else, a place of light. The first thing Lily noticed was the color. It wasn't like anything on Earth. It wasn't just bright. It was alive, shifting and moving as if the very air around her was woven with light. It didn't hurt to look at. In fact, it felt comforting, familiar. She stood in a vast open space that seemed to stretch forever, yet somehow it didn't feel empty. There was music, but not the kind played by instruments. It was everywhere, like the air itself was singing. Then she realized she wasn't alone. There were figures in the distance, their forms glowing, moving gracefully. They weren't walking. They were gliding. Their faces were peaceful, their eyes filled with something beyond words. But before she could move toward them, a presence stronger than anything she had ever felt wrapped around her. She turned, and there he was. Jesus stood before her, more real than anything she had ever seen. His presence was overwhelming, powerful, yet gentle. He didn't speak at first, but Lily didn't need words to understand. The love in his eyes spoke directly to her soul. But there was something else, something urgent. "You cannot stay," he finally said. His voice was deep, calm, yet firm. Lily wanted to protest, to beg to stay in this perfect place. But before she could, Jesus raised his hand. And suddenly, she wasn't just standing there anymore. She was seeing. Jesus showed her things she couldn't explain, things that made her heart race. She saw the world as it is now, but then it changed. She saw people losing faith, walking away from the truth, caught up in distractions, in greed, in things that didn't matter. She saw a world where love was being replaced by fear, where people stopped caring for each other. It wasn't a place of fire and torment. It was something worse, a place where people forgot how to love. And then he spoke words that shook her to her core. "You must tell them," Jesus said. "Tell them before it's too late." Lily barely had time to process what she was seeing before Jesus turned to her, his eyes filled with something she had never seen before. Sadness, urgency, and love, all at once. "The children of the world," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "Many of them are lost." Lily felt a wave of emotion crash over her. She didn't understand. How could they be lost? Weren't they just kids like her? Weren't they supposed to be safe? Then Jesus raised his hand, and suddenly she saw them. She saw children staring at screens, their eyes empty, scrolling endlessly through images that dulled their minds and numbed their hearts. She saw young boys and girls being pulled away from their families, not by force, but by distractions, games, social media, the constant need for approval from strangers who didn't even know them. She saw classrooms filled with students who no longer believed in anything beyond themselves. They laughed at faith, dismissed kindness as weakness, and mocked those who still prayed. She saw teenagers hurting inside, feeling alone even when they were surrounded by people. They chased after fame, beauty, money, and popularity, thinking it would make them happy, but behind their smiles, there was only emptiness. And then she heard something that made her shiver. A whisper, soft, but everywhere. "You don't need God," it said. "You are your own God." Lily's heart pounded. She recognized the voice, but she didn't know from where. It was smooth, comforting, deceptive. Jesus turned to her, his face filled with deep sorrow. "They are listening to lies," he said, "and they do not even know it." Lily felt her breath catch in her throat. She wanted to look away, to pretend she didn't see what was happening, but she couldn't. "The enemy works in silence," Jesus continued. "He does not need war or violence. He only needs people to forget." Lily felt cold, despite the warmth surrounding her, because she realized, in that moment, she had already seen this happening in her own world. Before Lily could even react, the vision shifted again. Suddenly, she wasn't in the peaceful realm anymore. She was somewhere else, somewhere different. The light around her dimmed, and she could feel a change in the air, something pressing, something heavy. She saw two great forces, though they didn't look like warriors or armies. One was light, one was darkness. The light was beautiful, glowing, powerful. It was filled with love, peace, and strength. But it wasn't aggressive. It didn't force itself forward. It simply stood firm, unwavering. The darkness, on the other hand, was not what she expected. It wasn't fire or monsters. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, subtle. It crept into places unnoticed, through screens, through music, through small, harmless-seeming choices that led people further and further away from the truth. Lily watched as people stood in the middle, torn between the two. Some walked toward the light willingly, drawn by its warmth. But others, many others, slowly drifted toward the darkness, not even realizing what was happening. And then she saw something that made her stomach drop. Some of the people standing in the darkness thought they were in the light. They smiled, they laughed, they called themselves good, but their backs were turned to Jesus. They didn't realize they had been tricked. Lily turned to Jesus, panic rising in her chest. "How do they not see?" she asked. His answer was simple: "Because they do not want to." The vision changed again, and this time, Lily saw homes, ordinary houses filled with ordinary families. Some of them were laughing together, eating dinner, talking without distractions. Others, however, were different. She saw a family sitting in the same room, but completely disconnected, a father on his phone, a mother watching TV, children lost in their own digital worlds. No one spoke. No one looked at each other. "They do not realize what they are losing," Jesus said. Lily then saw a family that was struggling but still together. They didn't have much money, their house was small, and life wasn't easy. But every night, they prayed together. They ate at the same table. They supported each other. "They have everything they need," Jesus said. Lily felt tears welling up in her eyes. Jesus turned to her, his expression serious. Families must fight for each other. The world will try to pull them apart. They must choose to stay together. Lily then saw something incredible. She saw people praying, some in churches, some in their homes, some completely alone. And as they prayed, light surrounded them. She saw a mother praying for her lost son, and in response, the darkness weakened around him. She saw a little girl praying at night, and an angel appeared at her side, listening. She saw a boy praying in secret at school, and his prayer reached heaven like fire. And then Jesus said something she would never forget. Prayer is not small. Prayer is not weak. It is the greatest weapon the world has. Lily saw the truth. Prayer wasn't just words. It changed things. It fought battles unseen. But people had forgotten. They do not pray because they do not believe, Jesus said. And they do not believe because they do not pray. Lily's heart ached. She knew she had to tell people. She had to make them understand. Because what Jesus showed her next was the most terrifying thing of all. Lily was taken to a place of emptiness, a place where people had chosen to forget God completely. It wasn't fire or torment. It was something worse. Nothing. No warmth, no joy, no hope. The people there weren't screaming. They were silent. They had everything they ever wanted in life. But now, it meant nothing. Lily felt a deep, crushing sadness. "They don't even realize what they've lost," she whispered. Jesus nodded. They made their choice. Then he looked at her, his expression both loving and firm. "You must tell them," he said. "Tell them before it's too late." Lily felt herself being pulled back. She wasn't ready. But it didn't matter, because her time wasn't up. She had a message to deliver. Lily barely had time to process the weight of Jesus' words before the vision shifted again. She was no longer in the empty place. Now she was hovering above the earth, looking down at her country, America. But what she saw made her heart race. The land stretched out before her, split into two paths. On one side, she saw a future of light. Families coming together, people praying again, neighbors helping neighbors. She saw churches full, not just with people, but with hearts truly seeking God. She saw leaders making decisions with wisdom, guided not by greed or power, but by a desire to help others. People stood united despite their differences. But then, the other side. Lily turned, and what she saw made her stomach drop. The air felt cold, heavy. In this version of the future, people had turned against each other. They didn't just disagree, they hated. Families were divided. Friends became enemies. People fought over things that didn't even matter. Faith was mocked. Prayer was forgotten. Love was seen as weakness. And then she saw something worse. The light wasn't just dimming, it was being pushed out. Not by force, not by violence, but by choice. People weren't fighting against the darkness. They were choosing it without even realizing it. Lily's hands shook. "Which future is real?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jesus looked at her, his eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. "That depends on them." The vision changed again, and now Lily saw herself, not in heaven, not in a vision, but back on earth. She saw herself sitting in her bedroom, scrolling through her phone, just like she had done 1,000 times before. But now she saw it differently. She saw the endless videos, the music, the trends, things that seemed harmless, but now she could see the truth beneath them. Some of them weren't just distractions, they were designed to pull people away from real conversations, away from real friendships, away from God. She saw kids losing themselves in a digital world, chasing validation through likes and comments, never realizing how much it weakened their spirits. Then, Jesus' voice echoed in her heart. They were created for more. Lily turned and saw young people standing up, choosing something different. She saw a girl leading her friends in prayer, a boy refusing to follow the crowd, even when it cost him popularity. Teenagers reading their Bibles, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted truth. And then she saw herself again, but this time, she was speaking. Not to her phone, not to her friends, but to the world. Jesus looked at her. "This is why you must tell them." Lily stood there, her heart pounding in her chest, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility that Jesus had just placed upon her. "You must tell them," Jesus said again, his voice calm yet full of urgency. Lily swallowed hard. "Tell who?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. "Everyone," he replied. Lily felt small in that moment. She was just a 13-year-old girl. Who would listen to her? Would people believe what she had seen? Would they understand the things Jesus had shown her? She thought about all the doubts she would face, the people who would laugh at her, the ones who would say she was crazy. Jesus must have known what she was thinking, because he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "The truth is not measured by who believes it," he told her. "The truth is the truth, no matter how many try to ignore it." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She understood now. This wasn't just about her. This wasn't just about her experience, her life, or her fears. This was about saving others. She had been given a mission, and even though she didn't feel ready, she knew she had to obey. Before Lily could ask anything else, she felt something shift. The ground beneath her feet vanished, and she was suddenly being pulled backward, faster than she could comprehend. "Wait!" She tried to shout, but it was too late. She felt herself being rushed back through the tunnel of light, her spirit moving at a speed that made everything blur. She felt weightless, yet at the same time, she could feel herself being drawn back to her body. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, she gasped. Her eyes flew open. The first thing she saw was her mother's tear-streaked face hovering over her, gripping her hand as if she would never let go. "Lily," her mother sobbed, pressing her forehead against hers. "Oh my God, you're back. You're back." Lily blinked, her mind struggling to catch up. The fluorescent hospital lights stung her eyes, and the beeping of machines filled her ears. She felt exhausted, as if she had been running for miles, But more than that, she felt change. Something inside her wasn't the same. She turned her head slightly and saw the doctors standing near the machines, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. She was gone. One of them whispered to a nurse. She had no pulse. This isn't possible. But Lily knew the truth. It wasn't medicine that had brought her back. It was God. And she had a mission to complete. When Lily returned home from the hospital, everything felt different. She was still herself, a 13-year-old girl who liked reading, playing outside, and spending time with her friends. But at the same time, she wasn't the same at all. The world around her felt brighter, as if she were seeing it through new eyes. Colors seemed deeper, sounds sharper, and the people she passed every day. Her neighbors, her classmates, the woman who bagged groceries at the store, they all seemed more real than ever before. She felt their emotions more intensely, their joy, their pain, their loneliness. She had always known that people carried their own struggles, but now she could almost see it, as if their hearts were whispering the truth she had never noticed before. At first, she stayed quiet about what had happened. She would sit at the dinner table, listening to her family talk about their day. But in the back of her mind, she kept replaying what she had seen. The battle between light and darkness, the warnings Jesus gave, the love he radiated even in the face of humanity's mistakes. She lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, how do I tell people? Will anyone believe me? The thought of people laughing at her, calling her crazy, dismissing her experience, it scared her. But the thought of staying silent and letting people walk into darkness without warning, that scared her even more. It started with small things. The first time it happened, Lily was talking to her mother in the kitchen. They were preparing dinner together, and Lily suddenly said, without thinking, "You don't have to worry about that thing at work tomorrow. Everything is going to be okay." Her mother froze, the knife she was holding hovering above the cutting board. "What?" she asked, looking at Lily strangely. Lily blinked. She hadn't even realized she had said it. The words had just come, like a whisper from somewhere deep inside her. Her mother's voice softened. "How did you know I was worried?" Lily couldn't explain it. She just knew. That night, her mother got an unexpected call. The problem at work that had been stressing her out for weeks had suddenly resolved itself. And that was just the beginning. One day at school, Lily was walking past a girl she barely knew, someone who always sat alone at lunch. As Lily passed her, she felt a sudden, overwhelming sadness. Not her own, but the girl's. Lily hesitated, then turned and said, "You're not alone, you know." The girl's eyes filled with tears on the spot. "How did you know?" she whispered. Lily didn't know what to say. She just felt it. It kept happening. People began coming to her, telling her things they had never told anyone before. They would say, "I don't know why, but I feel like I can talk to you." Or, "I was just praying for a sign, and then you showed up." Lily wasn't performing miracles. She wasn't predicting the future. But somehow, she knew things before people told her. She felt things before anyone spoke them aloud. She knew, deep in her soul, that this was proof. Jesus had sent her back with more than just a story. He had sent her back with a gift. Lily knew that the things she had seen in her near-death experience had terrified her. The warnings about what could happen if people continued turning away from God, the division growing between people, the spiritual battle that was happening even when no one could see it. But she also knew that fear wasn't the point of Jesus' message. The message wasn't, "Be afraid." It was, "Wake up. There's still time." The light hadn't disappeared. The world hadn't fallen into total darkness, yet. There was still hope. Lily started speaking up. First, it was just in church, sharing her story with small groups. She would stand nervously at the front of the room, her hands shaking, her heart racing. But then she would start to talk, and the moment she mentioned Jesus' voice, his presence, his love, the fear melted away. Because she knew, deep down, that this wasn't about her. It was about them. And people listened. She saw it in their eyes, the way they leaned forward, hanging onto every word. She saw it in the tears that spilled down their cheeks as they realized they had been lost, but they could still turn back. It didn't happen overnight. Not everyone believed her. Some people dismissed it, rolled their eyes, or changed the subject when she spoke. But some people truly heard her. And those people changed. They started praying again. They started choosing love instead of hate. They started seeing the world with new eyes, just like Lily had. But Lily knew that Jesus hadn't just shown her hope. He had also shown her a warning. Before she had been pulled back to earth, Jesus had given her one final message. A message that echoed in her soul every single day. Time is running out. Lily didn't know what that meant exactly. Lily wasn't telling her story just for people to listen and move on. She wanted people to act, to pray more, to love more, to stop letting distractions steal their faith. Because she had seen it, how easily people let go of God without realizing it. It didn't happen with a big dramatic moment. It happened in small choices, a missed prayer here, a little more anger there, a little more division, a little less faith, until one day they woke up and realized they had forgotten him entirely. Lily's message was simple. Wake up. There's still time, but you have to choose the light before it's too late. Lily's story is spreading. More and more people are hearing it, feeling it, believing it. But the question is, will you? Because the choice isn't just for other people. It's for you. Right here. Right now. Jesus is waiting, but time is running out. What will you choose? Jesus hadn't said when things would change. He hadn't told her an exact date or a moment when the world would shift. But she felt it, a sense of urgency that never left her. It was like a clock ticking in the background, growing louder and louder the more she ignored it. And she knew, beyond a doubt, that she had to tell as many people as she could before it was too late.